to better practices. The other thing is that there's so many different frameworks that you can be, it's okay to be confused by it. I know that some of our stakeholders, including Treasury here in New South Wales and so forth, are saying, well, how are you going to measure this? How are you going to measure performance and report on it? There's a number of frameworks. I particularly got deeply involved with the United Nations Global Compact, the Global Reporting Initiative, way back in 2010 when we actually signed a global compact agreement, and CPA actually adopted, would you believe? This is evidence, I guess. In 2010, CPA, and I quote on the screens, you'll see it, actually adopted the GRI initiative. And of course, where to from there? Well, you'll see also that things like the Global Reporting Initiative are actually really quite easy to implement. These are not hard. If you're a small charity, a small organisation, you can easily adopt some of the elements that are going to be very powerful to explain who your organisation is, what its purpose is, and that's extremely important in the not-for-profit sector, to explain and always reevaluate what your organisation stands for. As Eric Davis, one of my colleagues who's been supporting me with the ARA for many years, says, it's almost more important in not-for-profits to win the hearts first and then win the minds. And as my treasurer keeps reminding me, win the wallets, particularly if it does rely on donations, or even if it's dependent upon government grants. That's something that's very important to me as a director in, say, primary and community care services, which is an NDIS provider, but also aged care. So these things are absolutely essential. The short introduction to GSI standards, it's a really easy to download PDF. And even if you're not a CPA or chartered or government institute member, student studying at university, you'll find that this is really easy to follow. And it relies on things like data analytics, powerful ways to explain things. We don't want to complicate our message. We want to explain who we are, why we exist, and some of the important principles. Why do it? Why bother investing in better reporting? Why bother going to and challenging your own organisation and saying, we should be investing in this? And I had this debate with the CEO at the time of Life Saving Australia. Why should they, as one of the largest volunteering organisations, spend, and we were talking probably $5,000 to $10,000 at the time, why should they make that investment? That could be seen as a waste of money. Well, let me assure you, these are some of the reasons that I've spoken to many CEOs and directors over the years as to why you should be investing in better reporting. All right, so it's incredibly important that you see that there are a number of measurable benefits to investing in better, clearer reporting. It's about also never resting and becoming complacent. And so for a number of years, some of those organisations that started on this quest, adopting parts of the Global Reporting Initiative, have now seen their way into adopting integrated reporting or strategy on a page. And my colleague at University of New South Wales, Maria Balabat, would be a very good person for any of you to talk to on that matter. We're very approachable and always wanting to adopt it. It's probably adopted in the ASX top 100, the GRI, I would say currently about 82, 83%. It's pretty much, if you're not doing it, watch out. But in the not-for-profit sector, the adoption rate is sitting at, as best we can guess, about 22%. So there's a long way to go. And let me assure you, it's a very powerful conversation if you are going to some of your funding agencies to talk to them and demonstrate that you are doing things, taking a longer term view on your reporting to address confidence. Some of this material I actually grabbed from the ARA seminar. So the ARA runs a seminar each year. This year it's back in Sydney and it rotates between Sydney and Melbourne, alternate years. ARA itself is a not-for-profit, as I say, operating this evaluation criteria for 72 years. And Stephen Varady, one of the directors of ARA Limited, actually said to me that in terms of better reporting, it's a journey. It's not going to happen if you are on a board and say, look, let's implement this. It's not going to happen in the first year. It's a continuous improvement process, like anything. And again, I would emphasize to you, My philosophy in terms of annual reporting in the boards that I'm involved with, also increasingly in the universities for governing council papers, say whether it's public universities or private colleges, we have to address this idea that we have to take a long-term view, we have to be transparent, we have to continually evaluate what we're doing and why, and we have to report back on our risk management as well. So let me just make a few quick remarks, and Hendrik, please flag to me if we're under any time constraints, but I've got probably about 7 or 8 minutes to go, if that's okay with you. I would suggest to you all that the way to make an immediate impact is to think about your reporting in this framework. You want to make a connection with your stakeholders, whether it's somebody from Treasury, whether it's some of your members of your organisation, whether it's your donors, whether it's your clients that we continue to serve in parts of Sydney and also southern Queensland in terms of disability support services or aged care needs at home and so forth. I want to win the eyes, hearts and minds. I want to capture their attention. And so one of the ways that I like to do that is, sorry, there's a bit of latency on my screens, is let's think about images. So as I teach a subject called storytelling and sense making at UTS in Sydney, one of the really important things with storytelling is just, we learn very quickly that sometimes up to 80% of what we're communicating is visual. All right, so involve those senses if you can in your reporting. This is really examples of powerful covers, but also don't underestimate, are you going to use talent, what the industry calls talent? Are you going to use real clients, real photos and images of your staff and what they're doing in terms of the quest to eliminate polio, for example, or the Red Cross's images of, the blood reserves diminished during COVID? What about, there's another organisation that's looking at koalas sanctuaries, and they've done a heat map that's quite dynamic on their website. And it's really powerful, and it's explaining the connection between diminished numbers of koalas and bushfires in Australia and climate change. And it's a dynamic image which just shows what's happened over the last 6 years. And it dynamically shows the fall in funding. Now, that wins my attention straight away. And that's what I think we've got to learn to do and do it more effectively. As accountants, we need to see ourselves as leaders in business, finance and accounting. And we should be setting a higher standard, I think. Some of the other reports that I've got up there are really, really interesting. One of the ones that stands out for me, if you want to have a look at it, the New Zealand super funds and the have been consistent winners of best practice in reporting for some years. So have a look at the covers that they're involved with. New Zealand industry funds are really setting a high benchmark for great reporting. Flicking through them, dare I say it, they're super interesting because they're going to take a very, very long-term view of how they're protecting the public's money. And these are tough times, and people are really quite concerned about them. What else can you do? Think about your highlights. If you can say it with less words and more visuals, it might be doing. Is it beneficial to not just stick to current year and prior year, but looking at 5-year trends or 10-year trends? If you have that data with tools like Tableau or Power BI, it's really easy to actually integrate this and make your communication more powerful. And also think about financial literacy. Some of those statistics I captured from Ushi that, the survey revealed a lot of people are not really seeing their financial literacy as that high. So let's make it easy for our stakeholders to really understand what we're saying. Let's paint a picture of what's important. Winning the hearts, something super important, and how I got involved with organisations like St Vincent's Street Work all those decades ago is because I heard a story. I heard a story from the streets about, the devastating impact of Australia having some of the highest, sadly, highest statistics in youth suicide in the world. And that's not good enough. And so, winning the hearts, looking at that vision and mission and powerful images and stories and vignettes was a way that got me involved in the organisation. it wasn't looking at a balance sheet or profit and loss. It wasn't looking at the numbers. It was looking at the purpose of that organisation to run a mentoring program and to intervene. It was looking at St Vincent's making an impact in terms of many of the clients that couldn't afford to enjoy retirement after a lifetime of working hard. And these are really important issues that I take into each of my board meetings these days. So there's some images that you'll see on your screen that I hope are really engaging your senses. And there's some excellent reports. And to make it easy, there's just far too many to cover in this short update for you today. I would suggest that you just go to the ARA website and look up the gold standard reports. Download the ones that take your interest. Have a look through them and see what they're trying to communicate and how well they're doing it. Engaging the mind. On audit and risk committees particularly, I'm really deeply interested in how do we create a risk culture. I've got a colleague in the room that knows a lot more about this, our Chief Risk Officer, Peter McGee, who's also a moderator. And I won't put you on the spot to make a comment, Peter, but other than to say for the last decade, Peter's been a great moderator. And what I think he does is he processes the information that's been discussed, that's been reported, and he has this ability to ask great follow-up questions, to really take you deeper into what this means. So, for example, if your report is not thinking about things like supply chain management, thinking about global pandemics, is your disaster recovery or business continuity plan or recovery from a major incident ready to go, an update, then I would say to you that you're planning on failing at the moment with some of those things. So you've got to be thinking holistically about some of these topics. Also, just to conclude, and this is my final slide before I hand over to you, Hendrik, I would suggest to you that you need to also think about some of the ways that you're communicating complex changes. For example, adoption of new reporting standards around income, leases, stranded assets. Some of these things are really, really big issues for not-for-profits at the moment. And my colleagues that work with Jeff Reedy would be well aware that I think our insolvency experts are going to be quite busy. I think that COVID's thrown some spanners. It might have been quiet the last few years with a lot of us trying to just get through it. I know the Australian Tax Office has been very lenient. I think those days are probably gone. And I think that we're going to see some stress in the system and so forth. So for those reasons, I think it's even more important that we go back to basics: liquidity, cash flow, money in the bank, term deposits, exposure to stocks, property investments. These are going to be crucial elements that I know that I'm already seeing more frequency, more cadence in audit and risk committees to evaluate this. Why not get on the front foot and start to invest in lead indicators in your reporting? I might stop the presentation there if I can. And Hendrik, I'd like to hand over to you for public sector. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. What a comprehensive presentations. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk more about the public sector view. I know Dr. Ushi has talked about the principles of it from not-for-profit, and Andrew has talked about the directors from the director's point of view, as well as not-for-profit. I'm going to now share my screen and talk about the public sector view. By the way, in the last 10 minutes, we will have opportunities for Q&A. So people that are joining online, if you want to start punching your questions on chat, feel free to do so. We'll moderate that in the last 10 minutes. People in the room, feel free to jot down. There will be opportunities for questions at the end of our session today. So in the public sector, I use the source from New South Wales Audit Office of New South Wales, their better practice guide. And I think fully disclosures, I actually started my career in finance as the graduate for Audit Office of New South Wales. And since then, I've moved from the dark side to the bright side. Now, I know several auditors friends in the room. I'm not going to say audit is the dark side. There are always our friends, isn't it, in terms of building sound corporate governance, transparency, which is, at the end of the day, if you look at these better practice guidelines from Audit Office of New South Wales, there are not that much difference compared to what not-for-profit sector is adopting, commercial is adopting, what the directors are seeking from a good, better practice reporting, better reporting practice that needs to be implemented in organizations. Starting, from objectives are clear and measurable into discussing the strategies, risks, and other external factors. These are actually pretty much in line of what Dr. Ushi and Andrew have presented to us. There are probably no differences because at the end of the day, transparency and sound corporate governance are very, very important. You can call it TBL, GRI, as Andrew mentioned, and sadly, I actually know what TBL is, or TBL was. Disclosing my age there, I'm not that young anymore. I'm growing old. But ESG, I'm going to ask Andrew in the Q&A later on. What is ESG? I haven't heard of that term, so I'm not that old. I'm not as old as Andrew. Sorry, Andrew. But at the end of the day, better reporting practices is it. We want to promote transparency, sound corporate governance, getting our message from the organization across to the key stakeholders as well as the public. Now, Andrew kind of touched on NFP's motivations somewhat could be appealing for the funding and things like that. From public sector, I think the key difference is more around what is the purpose of an agency, why an agency is created, and that's probably the underlying principles of the better reporting guidelines in public sector, especially in New South Wales public sector. So in the next 8 minutes, I'm going to go through one by one of the principles, and I'm actually disclosing as well. I'm also a member of ARA. I'm also a passionate individuals in terms of good reporting. I know Andrew is on the board. I'm one of the coordinators in the awards committee, and I know Dr. Ushi is a great recent additions to our troops of adjudicators. So disclosures, I'm also taking some of examples from ARA, and whilst I'm going to talk more into the details of each point, I'm going to link it to an example that I've seen when I'm doing my role as coordinator with ARA, good examples that I can share with all of us today. So in terms of objectives, need to be clear and measurable. There's no surprises really. Everyone knows these SMART goals. We have to be specific. It has to be measurable. Has to be timely, and all. From public sector perspective, we need to define the impacts to either the environment, depending of your cluster, environment, or the economy. We do have legislative requirements, especially for a typical or a specialized entity or organizations, a statement of the manner and purpose of which the agency was established. And this is a requirement to be put as a better reporting practice as well. And of course, then the aims, the objectives, the vision and mission statements. And I think Andrew kind of touched on this as well. And Andrew kind of split it between the eyes, the heart, and the mind. It needs to be clear, the vision and the mission statement, where the organization is going. In simpler terms, is where are you going? Where is the organization going? I'm using an example of Logan City Council annual report. All the examples that I'm using are public informations. You can actually assess them through their website as well, or as Andrew suggested, visit the ARA website, araawards.com.au. There are a lot of examples in those website in the website as well. In terms of vision, mission, Logan City Council, what are their vision, mission? It's quite simple, stated. They want to become an innovative, dynamic city of the future. So it's also appealing to the eyes, as Andrew put it in his presentations. From the cover, we know that's Logan City. It's a local council annual report, and we know where that council is going to. So this is some of the, the key things that we are looking when we look at a better reporting practice, when we want to have a good report. The next item is focusing on the results and the outcomes. When we present the report, it shouldn't just be the activities, but we want results, outcomes, and link that outcomes directly to the objectives and how that then impact to the community and relates to your vision, mission, goals, target. An example that I choose is West Farmers, is how are you going to get there? Focusing on that measurements. So kind of the summary in here with West Farmers, they have a clear primary objectives and how that link to their shareholders, stakeholders, and build it that way. The third aspect is discussing that results against expectations. Actual versus target. Management accountants, probably your day job. You have your financial actuals results, your budgets, how the actuals traveling against your budget, and explaining that variance analysis. I guess the variance analysis, in my view here, in the point here, is kind of more important than just reporting the two sets of numbers, but comparing the two numbers and reasons for any significant variance from the target. Or for us accountants, actuals versus budget, of course, then the variance, the difference between actuals and budgets, and why that occur. More importantly, though, the actions taken or planned actions to address variances, especially the one that are not wanted, the unfavorable variances. In a simpler language, how far did you get? How far did you get? An example is, a performance summary. You have your products. What's the initiative? What's your measure of success? And then explain that as well as the variance analysis, kind of in simpler term, the language. The next dot point from the audit office guidelines is it needs to be complete and informative. So it covers all key functions and programs of the agency. So if you look at the ARA website, this is also one of the key factors that we look at when we adjudicate, when we judge a report, whether it's according to the standard or not. It needs to give explanations. It needs to give a coverage of what the organization is doing, performing throughout the year. If it's an annual report, of course, or if it's another report, then suit to the purpose of that report. Complete and informative. It's advisable report on performance against target identified, and then honest coverage. We are empowering transparency. It's much better to also set up your challenges, why you don't meet the target, and explain why, and actions on actions to make sure the target is met, or what are the planned actions, rather than covering, we didn't do well because of something, we don't present it. But it is important to actually present both success and setbacks as well. Trend data is always something that gives more complete picture. So it's always good to all add the trend data, comparative tables or graphs into the report. Explaining changes over time as well. Consistent, sufficient information to compare results from year to year. So it's not only a standalone for this year, but what does that information mean in comparisons to others organizations, similar organization, benchmark it, or to your performance last year. In simple words, kind of put together what did you do? What did you do as organizations throughout the year? Maybe summarize that into highlights, and then what are completed, undeliverable, whether they are on track with the KPIs, they need to monitor what's amber, or you actually didn't meet the targets, below target, and then in the next page explain why and actions taken to rectify those. So what did you do throughout the year or for that report? This is just another examples that I like. Sometimes we need to probably group it. It also needs to appear to the eyes, heart, and mind. The eyes needs to be kind of visually nice looking as well. Readers easy to find information that they need, they want, and then you appeal to the heart and the mind, as Andrew put it. Last but not least, you also need to provide evidence for value for money and benchmarking for the public sector. And the key items based on the audit office guidelines is define the populations, what the program is designed for if, for example, if you are in transport, you're building a road, what are the targeted community to build that road or spend that money has to be clearly defined. Identify the main outcomes to your clients or stakeholders for public sector entities, and costs, of course, right? And then we are better financial reporting as well, and as an accountant. That's why the audited financial statement is always part of annual report as well. Benchmarking is the suggestions. You can also do benchmarking against similar organization. In other words, where is the evidence? Where is that? This is what you do. Where's the evidence? Explain that in your report. That's what we did. This is how we did it. These are the evidence. So, kind of trend reports, tables comparing the different financial year. That is a good way to present that evidence. You can also do it text-based with some graphs, kind of photos of what actually happening in your organizations. That's always good to add into your report. The last element in the audit office guidelines is the strategic risks and external factors. And from ARA perspective, governance is one of the key points that we look at as well when we adjudicate reports. Where is the organizations, where is their future directions, strategic, whether risks are properly identified and documented and presented in the report. This is always good. In audit office terms, this report on the effectiveness of risk management and internal control as well, which is a key element that we also look at based on ARA principles. So, sorry, a bit rushing a little bit throughout the points, but that are the key points that we look at from public sector perspective, which I thought at the end of the day, it's very similar, very similar to commercial or even not for profit, and as well as from the IICD, from the director's point of view. I'll stop sharing at this point. And in the last 10 minutes, I think we're going to utilize the time to invite people if they have any questions, comments, or suggestions. If you are online, feel free if you want to type in chat, or if you want to just raise your hand,
Hi, Hendrik. We actually have Stella from our Chats with Discussion group in the room, and she's been monitoring the chats during the presentation. Stella, do we have any questions for Dr. Ushi or Hendrik or myself? Not at this stage? All right. But in the room, we have a hand up. So, all right.
Yeah, I've got a question for each of you. Dr. Ushi now mentioned about improvement having because of the general lack of financial knowledge among the Australian public, that she advocate a snapshot or whatever, a summary. I just want to know whether she's come up with a template, and also in that snapshot how to actually strike the balance between qualitative and quantitative information, so that the reader will get a complete understanding of what's going on, with that entity.
Okay, so thank you for your question. I've just stopped by my video because to make sure you can hear me properly. Okay, fantastic question. I do not have a template for a snapshot, but I can make one if someone wants one. It's just about my suggestion is always to have like a graph of your revenue, because they have very specific items we want in terms of revenue, in terms of expenses, and then you could have like a little table just to provide information like dollar values of the financial information items we are after. That could take about half of the page, so you don't want it to be too much information, because if the public struggle to understand or to make sense of financial information, you want to keep it as simple as you can. And with the narrative side or the non-financial side, it's a good idea to include a few pictures or just a few stories or just something really brief in the second half of the same page. So that way you get to provide like a snapshot of where the financials are for that year and also what the social impact is. And it's always a great idea to at the bottom, to provide links to your different reports. So okay, you get to see everything in a flyer format, and you want more information, that's where you go for it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Australian National Charities Commission. On the website, now they actually have a register of all charities.
That's
and
right.
then they provide a so-called financial extract, financial summary of that charitable organization for the past year or so.
That certainly meets a minimum standard. Can I add, Ushi, I know that your answer made a lot of sense to me, and your offer to create a template is very good. Can I add to that question as well? That's partly what I would say is some of the gold standard reports in, say, housing, social housing that I evaluated this year. And Ushi, I know that you're involved as well, but I find that if you have a look at some of the things that Bridge Housing is doing, absolutely excellent in terms of synthesizing really critical information. And the second thing I would say is the integrated reports, particularly in mutual banks that are emerging, that started in Victoria. That is absolutely fantastic because it's a nice balance, that word balance, of getting qualitative and quantitative information into a couple of pages. And by reading those, I've got a really good idea of what that organisation's purpose is, how they've performed, how they're managing current risks and emerging risks, and also what their culture is. What do they stand for? I think those are the other things that I would add. I think that your minimum standard, sure, ACNC, and plus some of the key ratios that I talked about it before are very useful. The other thought that comes to my mind is that I really like what some of the companies are doing in aged care at the moment to try and address Royal Commission and lack of community trust since those findings. So a leading example of fuller reporting, but also starts off concisely in their first few pages, is St Vincent's, Queensland. If you have a look at that annual report, that's interestingly one of the largest providers of aged care in the country. That's a really good example of concise and balanced reporting. Ushi, did you want to add to that? And we have a hand up in the room as well, just acknowledging.
I just want to add to that. With the ACNC, it was something that happened after I did a presentation to them about a snapshot document. And that was about 3-ish years ago. So I did go to Melbourne and present to the executive team. And that's when they thought, okay, they do have all this information. All they have to do is use a spreadsheet and, present them differently. And it was great to see they had this on their website. So like you mentioned, that was the bare minimum. So the ACNC does collect information, but like we know, they don't always get every single information they want. So they have to have the bare minimum. And that's kind of, leading the way. But if you really want to have to demonstrate the impact of what you're doing, and really like the presentation today have said, from the eyes to the heart to the mind, you need to be a bit more creative and try to present things that are way more accessible and also address users' information needs. That's important.
Okay, we have another question in the Sydney office.
Yes.
Hi, Ushi. This simplified presentation, is this like an adjunct to your, formal reporting and detailed reporting, like something they've got to do in addition, right?
Yeah, okay. I do understand when you say it's an in addition, but what I always say is most of your reporting or your financial information would be in a software or on a spreadsheet or something where you can easily just spit out a graph from it, rather than go and do extra work, because I do understand the sector has got maybe not the large ones, but medium and small size one. We do have limited resources. We rely a lot on volunteers. So I do think you can use existing information just to produce that document rather than try to reinvent the wheel, I would say.
Is that okay? Yep, no follow.
No problem, Andrew.
Can I go to an online question now, and I'll hand over.
So we received a question from David online. It mentioned that he finds a lot of discussion on non-financial performance of NFPs, including the public sector and activities, and not on outcomes. For example, it does not seem common for education departments to refer to the international education standards, despite the extra billions of dollars spent over the last few years and declining Australian results. So what do you see as initiative to improve the reporting of outcomes?
Great question. Ushi, would you Ushi and Hendrik, I've got a few ideas on this, but I'll give you both the first opportunity to respond.
I think I'll let Andrew go with this one, and then
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, look. Let me wrap into my answer. Partly, Hendrik, your question. I think that sustainability reporting is very much focused on outcomes reporting, and if you're not familiar with it, as Hendrik was saying, it's really emerging. It's something that the ARA board is taking on quite seriously. So it does have a huge international following, but it's only been running really in operations for the last, I would say, the last 14 months maximum. So it's really new and current. It builds off the GRI, but it also is in partnership with many organisations like microfinance and the IMF. So it is global. Secondly, I would say that our experiments at St Vincent's, disability services, street work, in terms of social return on investment, for example. So was our attempt to really try and measure outcomes and results from, things like a mentoring program, and really trying to nail down how long that gestation period takes to get some return. For example, our recidivism, crime, these sorts of things, we can measure them, but we just need to have different constructs. And I would suggest to you that those are incredibly important if I'm looking at breaking a cycle of violence or criminal behaviour, to be able to say that I've got a framework here and I've been using it and reporting on it consistently, and adjusting some of those metrics and making sure that your assumptions are transparent. It helps. It certainly helped me when I had a grant from PwC Foundation at the time to get a firm like that involved in attesting that this was being measured fairly, that the assumptions and the numbers and the outcomes were actually something that could be proven. And so this is the big trick with outcomes reporting. If you say that you're going green in your produce and outcomes, how do you evidence that? And so right now at university, there's a huge amount of undergrads and postgrads that are studying not civil engineering, but environmental engineering. They're going to be I see that as an opportunity for CPA, chartered accountants, etc., to team up and to start to say, we need to define how we're going to measure things like this and get away from any skepticism like greenwash, which is incredibly huge risk at the moment with, these products are, producing fresh air, etc., or hybrid cars, etc. There's going to be some big class actions, I can tell you, coming our way in the near future around what is good, what is sustainable. So the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, if you're not familiar with it, it's quite accessible. The information's there. There is some cost to it, a bit like Standards Australia and ISO's accreditation. There is cost, but as I can say from working in aged care sector, you have to do it. You have to do it. It's your license to operate in the industry. So you've got to take a long-term view with some of these things.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. That's a very comprehensive response. And thank you, David, for the question as well. And David Gilchrist also commented, yeah, there's also additional issue of outcomes reporting when outcomes might take more than one financial year. Yes, yep. And I think in terms of initiative, I like what Andrew mentioned. I think CPA, CA, we can partner up and do more initiative, increase that awareness of the significant importance of outcomes reporting as opposed to just reporting on activities. Now, I'm mindful of time. We actually have been 4 minutes over. Is there one last burning question from anyone online or in the room?
None online. None online, one in the room.
Okay, let's do maybe one last question. So I'm mindful of the time as well.
No, personal interest now in terms of transparency, consistency, or whatnot. How do the panel find the standard of COVID-19 disclosure in the NFP and public sector over the last 2 years?
Would you be able to repeat that question, Andrew?
Sorry, I actually missed one of the words there too. What's the question? How do we?
How do the non-profit
reporting
sector disclose the COVID-19?
Great question. Okay, how do the not-for-profit and public sectors disclose COVID-19? Happy to have a quick comment on that. But Ushi, Hendrik, first right to reply.
Yep, COVID-19, of course, is a major impact to organizations in the past 2 years. In the better reporting practices that I've seen, COVID-19 coverage have actually been very, very good in terms of they put in what kind of impacting their activities and then outcomes and how they relate one to another. COVID-19, of course, is a unique one, but from time to time, we will have that disruptions into our activities. And it's always good to be transparent and disclose the full impact and strategies risk to the organizations in terms of understanding the situations and overcome those. Ushi, anything to add?
Yeah, and I think what was very interesting is many organizations took the initiative to not just report about COVID-19 on their overall outcome or /outputs, but they also took the initiative of reporting about how they've adjusted, the activities during the period of COVID-19, how they have looked after the staff members. It was just fantastic to see how they were just reporting so much, because I think they were doing so much, and we kind of all learned so many new things about it.
Yeah, I echo all of that. Plus, I think I would suggest that if your reporting isn't focused on people risk, that's a huge thing. There has to be new ways of working, some of which are permanent, others of which will keep flexing. So I think I would be emphasizing things like agility and flexibility of the organization, and that has governance really kept up with that. We actually got our finger on the pulse in terms of the long tail that we're going to have from COVID. We're not over this. And having spent a bit of my career in insurance, I think we still haven't fully calculated the costs of COVID. I think we'll be paying for it for some time. And so as a reporting entity, you have to sort of be quite careful and make sure that you are looking at long tail risk, class actions, employee benefits, these sorts of things. You'll need to cover that off in your reporting as best you can as an emerging risk. I don't think it's a dealt with issue. COVID pandemic is already having impact in other sectors such as investments and supply chain. So look, at the risk of jumping on in here, I think we are over a little bit of time for our online audience. Hendrik and Ushi, over to you to close.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. First of all, I think thank you for everyone for attending, be it online or in person. I thought, yes, it's been it's great to see so many different faces, audience in person and online joining this event. I would like to actually thank CPA Australia as well. We were not sure how it will work. Some presenters online, some in the office, but I think it works okay today. We did have some technical difficulties before the event, but that's solved. And thank you CPA Australia for doing that. I would also like to thank Western Sydney University sponsoring this event. For people in the room, I believe there are some food and drinks that you can enjoy after this event. And that's thanks to Western Sydney University as well. Dr. Ushi, do you have anything to add?
No, I would say thank you everyone for attending and for staying till the end. I know we've been a bit over time. We will be having our next discussion group at the Paramatta venue, which is Western Sydney University's campus. That's on Macquarie Street, and I might send information about these because it will be a hybrid event. So if people want to attend online or face-to-face, you're most welcome to. And our next presenter is going to be Hendrik, and he's going to talk about virtual meetings.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Ushi. Andrew, any short comments to closing comments from you?
Yeah, our Chatswood discussion group, we have a couple of people in the room here today. I think Azumi, is it? Aiko. I was remotely close, and Joanne. So they're going to help us, along with Stella and myself, to get the Chatswood discussion group up and running. And also, if anyone's interested, tomorrow night in CPA, we still can accommodate a couple more people because just like some of our guests today and even our speakers, COVID's had a big impact. So personally, I congratulate Ushi and Hendrik on an outstanding presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, Ushi. Thank you, everyone. See you at the next one.
See you. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Ushi. I think that works okay.
Yeah,
So
I think that's
good.
good.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get access to the recordings.
Okay. I think, yeah, I'm going to sign off as well.
Yeah, me
Have
too.
some lunch and prepare for my next meetings.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Ushi. I'll be in touch for the August one. We'll release the flyer as soon as we can.